Hello and welcome to NexTalks. I'm Nex, and this is where I talk. Today we're talking about money. I thought this would be a good subject for episode 1 as there's an impending recession on everyone's mind, and it's something that everyone's thinking about and a lot of people are feeling right now. Prices are up 7%. Average hourly earnings are down 2%, and these are numbers just from the last year. So things are not moving in a great direction. But it's interesting because people can react to this information differently. I mean, some people can react in really dangerous ways by just kind of acting like it's not happening, avoiding it, not taking any action, not addressing it, not acknowledging it, not preparing. But that doesn't have to be you, and it doesn't matter where you're at financially today because you have access to all the information that you could possibly want, and we all have access to this information. We live in the information age. So this is something I'm pretty passionate about, and I'm excited to talk about with you guys today. Now, we all have our stories about money, right? The messages we were taught, the behaviors and habits that we observed by the people who influenced us and raised us as we were growing up. That's culturally, societally, and directly from our parents, our guardians, whoever raised us. And Mom, if you're listening to this, sorry for putting your business on blast a little bit here. But when I was a teenager, I remember a really poignant memory. I saw my mom at the dining room table. She was looking at bills, balancing her checkbook, probably paying out rent for the month, managing her finances back in the day before it was so virtual and digital. And she was crying. She was really stressed out about her bills and about money. And I remember thinking, I need to do whatever I can do to keep that from happening to me. And I remember at the time, I really viewed money as evil. I viewed it as the problem, that if we didn't have to worry about money, then my mom wouldn't be crying. She wouldn't be stressed out. I wouldn't have to go without certain things that I might want because of money. And what I came to realize was really what money represents. So take a moment to think about what messages you received as a child from your parents, whoever raised you, influenced you, and how you've carried those messages now with you into adulthood, and how that's really impacted and shaped your relationship with money. Chances are there's a lot of healing that needs to be done with that relationship and also your mindset about money, even before changing any financial behaviors or management strategies. It starts with awareness, like so many things in life. That's really step 1, is financial awareness. Where are you at financially, really? Stop avoiding looking at your situation if that's what you're doing, or if you've had good practices in the past and you've gotten off track. We're about to go into a new year here. By the time you're hearing this, we should already be in the new year in 2023. It's a good time to reflect and see where you're at and increase that awareness around everything in your life. But today we're really focused in on money and getting a clear financial picture and maybe creating a new narrative and a new relationship, a new mindset, a new mantra in our financial world. What does money represent to you? To me, it represents freedom. It represents independence. It represents my ability to help other people. It represents abundance. It represents opportunities. So it represents something positive now rather than some evil thing that makes my mom cry. So now that I realize it's a powerful tool that can be used for good and in the right hands can really go far, then I want it. And I don't feel bad about wanting it. I think there's a really weird narrative that money is the root of all evil. That's actually in the Christian Bible. So if you were raised Christian like me, you were taught that it's kind of selfish and greedy to value money and that there's so many more important things than money, which is absolutely true. But money can make the attainment of these great experiences and things like safety, security, access to healthy food, like I said, opportunities earlier, all of these things are made possible and more easily accessible when you have money. So money is just a tool. It's not the thing. It's not like we work because we want money. We want money because we want the stuff that money can buy and the experiences that money can buy. Studies have shown that experiences are worth way, way, way more than material objects. So when you have money, if you spend it on experiences and, like travel or going out on a date or trying some new experience like a dance class or martial art or something like that, you're going to much more value the way that you spent that money than if you go buy a nice fancy car or a fancy watch. Even though they can bring you some level of satisfaction and pleasure, it just does not compare to experiences. That was my little tangent about how important it is to focus on experiences over materialistic things. But if you like fancy cars and watches, that's fine. I don't judge you. I'm just letting you know the psychology. But enough about that for now. I want to get into the practical meat and potatoes of this episode, because if you are going to like me and you're going to like my podcast, it's going to be because you get actual value from it, and we're going to vibe because that's how I feel. I read exclusively nonfiction books. I really want to spend my time when I'm listening to a podcast or learning about something. I want it to be applicable to my life to some extent, even if it's just an interesting bit of conversation subject matter. Generally speaking, I want something that I can take away and apply to my life right away, and I'm hoping that you get that from today's episode. So if you like to read books too and you want to read some books on this subject yourself, my top recommended book that I suggest to people all the time, this is just something that I thought was a really great introduction and also a good book to just kind of check in on your financial situation. It speaks to different levels of your financial world, whether you're in debt or you are actively investing and kind of have too much money to know what to do with. So anywhere in between those two things, this book is really, really valuable, and it's called Financial Freedom by Grant Sabatier. Hopefully I'll be able to put the title of that, maybe a link wherever you're hearing this podcast. Otherwise, you can just look it up, Financial Freedom by Grant Sabatier. And in this book, he talks about the machine of your financial world. And this machine has 3 levers. And you want 2 of these levers cranked up to max, and you want the other lever cranked down as low as possible. And the levers are cash flow, investments, and expenses. As you can imagine, you want your cash flow and your investments to be cranked up to the max and your expenses to be as low as humanly possible. So you got to figure out where you're at with these 3 levers right away. Some of you might already be on the ball with this, and some of you have really never taken the time to look at the big picture of your financial machine. And now is your chance to do that. So set aside a whole day. If you've never done this before, give yourself an entire day to do this, because if you try to fit it into some little 30-minute window in between, on your lunch break, you're never going to get it done. You're not going to be as thorough as you need to be. And sometimes this can bring up a lot of emotion. So you want to make sure that you have the day, you have the time, you have the space to really dig in and get the passwords to whatever bank accounts you need to find and get everything all squared away and looked at so that you can figure out just where you are. That's where we're going to start. And then once you know where you're at, then you can start to figure out what the next steps are going to be to get you to where you want to be. So you start with your cash flow. How much money are you making and from what? Make sure that you're checking in on any deductions, taxes that you're paying, fees that you're paying. If you're working with payment processors, just make sure that you have seen all the fine print and you know really exactly where the money is coming from, and if there's any way to decrease anything that's impeding that cash flow between whoever's trying to pay you and you. So whatever middlemen are there, try to eliminate those and decrease those as much as possible so that you can maximize how much money is is coming in and actually making it into your pocket at the end of the day. That's one of the things about being an employee is you end up generally paying a lot more in taxes than you do if you are self-employed or doing some type of contractor work, because when you're an independent contractor or a business owner, you write off your expenses and then you pay your tax on the adjusted amount, whereas when you're an employee, you pay your taxes on the total amount and then you pay your expenses after that. So it's a really big disadvantage, but some people prefer working for somebody else for lots of different reasons, and that's not really the intention of today's podcast, just a little tangent. So once you've done the cash flow bit, it's time to get to the expenses. And this is the most time consuming of all of the steps, most likely because you might have different bank accounts, different credit cards, different places you have to look at. And then you also want to really look at the total big picture. So maybe not every single transaction, but in a perfect world, if you have some time to really reflect, if you haven't been tracking your transactions, if you're not regularly checking your statements, making sure there's no strange charges or accidental charges or anything weird going on, make sure that you have your finger on the pulse of your finances. It's amazing to me how many people go to financial managers and investment advisors, and they expect these people to care more about their money than they do and to know more about their money than they do. I just really don't think that's the best way to do it. I think we're all responsible for our own money in so much as we are cognitively capable of doing so. So we can still have people on our team, but they can't care more about our money than we do, or we're going to end up probably giving them a lot of our money and maybe not getting a fair value exchange if we're not really paying attention. So pay attention. Add up those expenses from the last year. So you can go through all of your statements the last year, add up that total amount, resist the urge and the temptation to not list certain expenses. Sometimes people are like, well, this was just a weird one-time kind of fluky thing, that an emergency that came up. I'm not going to have to spend that amount of money on something like that again next year. It's not really a normal yearly expense, so I'm not going to count it. But that's not what you want to do. Don't make your life harder than it needs to be. Just add everything up, because unexpected expenses always come up. Hopefully not every single year, but even then, small ones and big ones will come up. And it's much better to be prepared and plan and expect that big unexpected expenses are going to come up than it is to be caught off guard by them and surprised by them and not prepared for them, and then have it create a lot more chaos and stress than it needs to, because the reality is things are going to happen in the future that we don't know yet. And it's better to just be prepared, because if nothing happens next year, really huge financially for you, then hey, you were prepared for it and now you have a bonus. Now you're ahead of the game, rather than assuming nothing bad or unexpected is going to happen and then everything kind of effing up your plans next year. A good thing to do too, once you've added up your yearly cost of living, is to divide it by 12 so you know what your average monthly expenses are. Because some months are bigger than others. Around the holiday season, Christmas time, a lot of times people's expenses are way higher. Now they're pumping the heat through their house in the cold or whatever is going on, plus all the gifts. And then sometimes of the year you're not spending much at all. So sometimes people don't really even realize on average how much they spend on a monthly basis, and they don't even realize that they might need to be earning a lot more money than they are just to cover their cost of living, let alone to give them an access to try to build and prepare for the future. And give yourself a pat on the back, because that's the worst part, is running those yearly expenses. And I'm right there with you. I do this every year because every year is different. And we can't just assume, oh, well, I calculated my yearly expenses in 2015. So I just assume that my financial situation is the same and that I have the same cost of living here however many years later. Yeah, no, check it every year, because like I said, keep your finger on the pulse. Care about your money, care about your financial situation, and remind yourself, what does it represent? What are you going to use this money for? Why is it important? And then the last lever of this machine that we're borrowing the concept from Financial Freedom by Grant Sabatier is your investments. So some of you, this is super easy because you don't have any investments yet. And that's okay. Like I said, we're just getting clear, we're getting awareness. And some of you have a really close, you know exactly what you're invested in and you track it closely. And then there's going to be a lot of you somewhere in the middle where you have a retirement account, you have a 401k with your job maybe, or some type of pension, but you don't really know much about it. You don't really understand what exactly you're invested in that 401k. You don't really track its performance or direct any of the funds. You just kind of set it and forget it, which is great if you're setting aside money for your future at all, but take some time to figure out what the value is of those investments today and what those investments are. Now I have an additional challenge for you, which is to add up all of your liabilities, all of your debt. This isn't one of the levers on Sabatier's machine for finances, but it is a really important number, and it's important for you to know where you're at. It's also probably the number that people avoid more than any other. So you need to take some time, figure out exactly who you owe and how much. Also, keep track of the interest rates. So make a little maybe spreadsheet of all your different credit cards, your student loans, your mortgage, any loans, anything that you have borrowed money from someone and financed and have not yet paid back. Add that all up, then take a deep breath and make a plan. So I'm not going to go into this too much on this episode, but I do want to just give you 2 debt strategies that seem to be very effective for people. And I believe they're from Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. Let me know if I got that wrong, but they are called the debt avalanche and the debt snowball. Now, the debt avalanche is the best, most efficient way to do this. And this is simply by paying as much as you possibly can towards the one with the highest interest rate. So a lot of your mortgages, your student loans, they're going to be low interest rates, usually under 10%. But your credit cards, if you have other kinds of high interest loans, they're going to be well over 20% most of the time. So the most efficient strategy is to get those paid off first so that you're not spending as much month to month in interest. Now, for some of you, that's going to be too daunting. It's too big of a number, or it's too overwhelming, or there's just too many debtors on this list and you're just feeling overwhelmed. And for you, the debt snowball might work better. So this strategy pays off the lowest principal amount first. So whatever has the lowest amount, maybe you have $500 out as opposed to like $5,000 on something else. Well, you want to take the smallest one. Hey, maybe you owe your friend $20 and you put that on your list. Okay, well, take care of that one first, because it's going to give you a little dopamine release. It's going to give you that sense of achievement and accomplishment. Like, yes, I can chip away at this. I can sculpt this block of clay. Is that what they sculpt things out of? I don't know. I can sculpt this into a beautiful sculpture, even though right now it's just this block and I have no idea how it's ever going to take shape. Well, hey, I can pay off this little tiny $100, $200 loan. And once I get that off of my list, it's going to empower me and activate me and give me that energy and that realization that I can do this. And I'm going to tackle the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And maybe at some point you switch from the snowball to the avalanche once you feel ready. But either way, as long as you're taking steps to get yourself out of debt, you're taking steps in the right direction. Also, if I understand the Financial Peace University strategy correctly, you are paying your minimum payments on every other debt. So you're not letting any of these go without making at least a minimum payment. So you get your minimum payments for every single debt every single month, so that there's no late penalties or anything like that. And then you're putting every single penny that you can, every excess, anything that you can save up by decreasing that expenses lever, you're taking that and you're throwing it either towards the avalanche method or the snowball method. And while you're at it, I mean, you've already done so much work, you might as well figure out what your net worth is. So you add up all of your assets. This is all of the accounts that you've already looked at. So this is like anything where you have cash. So this is your investment accounts, your bank accounts, your Venmo, your PayPal, your Cash App, like anywhere, your actual physical cash on hand, any cash that you have, and then any assets that you have that are worth at least $100 or more. And I'm talking like you could sell them for $100 today, not they're worth $100 to you sentimentally, but I'm talking things that you could actually turn over on the market today for at least $100. At least that's my cutoff. Yours might be different, but that's what I use as my minimum amount so that I count it towards an asset. And then I track all of these so that I see how my assets change in value, because most of these things are going to decrease in value over time. So automatically, just by the depreciating value of your items and the evil work of inflation, you are going to be losing value and losing net worth over time if you just keep everything completely passive. So you add up all of the assets and then you subtract your total debt, your total liabilities, and that's your net worth today. Maybe it's higher than you thought it was, maybe it's lower than you thought it was, but either way, you know what it is and you know that it can change. It has changed in the past and it will change in the future. So let's learn about how to change it in the direction we want to change it in. Let's talk savings. So there's a lot of different opinions on how much we should keep in savings, and some people don't really realize that putting all of your money under your mattress, so to speak, or into the savings account and not doing any kind of investing and taking any risk with it is actually one of the biggest risks you can take, because your money, just by inflation alone, loses on average 3% of its value every single year. And like we talked about at the beginning of the episode, it's lost 7% of its value in just the last 1 year. So your best bet is not to keep all of your money in cash, although I personally believe that it's good to have some emergency nugget or a nest egg that you are able to pull from that's very liquid. Liquid just means that it converts to cash very easily. So for instance, money under your mattress, you just grab it. You take money out of your savings account, it's cash. You don't have to sell off some of your investments or deal with penalties or anything like that. You just have it easily and quickly when you need it. So the amount that you need for this is going to vary depending on your appetite for risk and your age. So for me, I have a pretty low appetite for risk, and I've been studying this for several years, and I've heard anywhere from having 1 month's worth of expenses in your savings to having 12 months worth of expenses in your savings, meaning that if you made $0, you would be able to live off of the money in your savings account or in your safe, however you save your money, and you would be able to live off of that for 1 month to 1 year. So for me, I go right in the middle and I try to keep 6 months of cash in my savings account at all times. And anything above and beyond that, I want that to be actively invested and working for me. I think one of the biggest secrets, is really not a secret, of the wealthy is that their money works for them. If you can figure out how to put your money to work for you so that your money makes you money, particularly without you having to do just about anything, then you are winning. Then you are on track towards creating real sustainable wealth into your future. I had initially planned to go into the investment strategy that I use in this episode, but I feel like I've already given you a lot to do. So I'm going to save that for another episode. So if you've liked this so far, please subscribe or follow, whatever it's called, wherever you're at, and stay tuned for the next episode or a future episode where I'll talk about the investment strategy that I use and share with you more details about investing in general. But for now, some things that you can do, even with the information that you have, is brainstorming. Spend intentional time actively brainstorming ways to increase the amount of money that comes into you. So think of side hustles, think of business ideas, think of things that you can sell, think of skills and services that you have, think of products that you could create, think of patents that you could get, and think of ways to make money and spend time regularly doing this, especially when you feel a lot of creative energy. But remember that ideas are only great ideas if they cause action or some behavioral change. So once you have a great idea, take action on it. Spend time thinking of these things and then spend time creating the ideas. Try them out. Fail your way forward. Even if it seems like a great idea and it totally flops, you'll learn a lot in the process and you'll be better off than if you just kept doing what you're doing now and didn't take any risks or take any chances or try anything new. So what have you got to lose? Hopefully I've said something during this episode to help you increase your freedom units. Freedom units is a term I'm borrowing from Ty Lopez that he uses to refer to dollars, and I think it's a great term. And I'm wishing you lots of abundance, lots of freedom energy, and lots of calm, patience, and peace during this process. Thank you for listening to NexTalks. I'm Nex. I talked. I hope you liked it. I'd love to hear from you. If you have thoughts on today's talk, or if there's something else you'd like to hear me talk about, go ahead and leave it in the comments or reach out to me on social media.